Y'all come on in and have a seat. Plenty of spaces. All right, the doors are shut. Yeah, absolutely.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Okay, amazing. Well, welcome to session number 3. The name of this session is Ask the Expert, a panel discussion on fundraising. My name is Laura Golme, and that's Crystal Cooey. We're going to be the volunteer supporters for today's session. If you guys have any questions or issues, let us know. We can help anything out. I'd love to open up today's session in prayer. Before I do that, I want to let you know that there are, at the beginning of every session, we announce if this is a session for continuing education credit or not. This is not one of them, but some of them are. And I want to let you know that we just really, really want to thank these speakers and these panelists for coming all this way and, to give us their advice. So I'll go ahead and open us up in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you so much for just giving us this space, this conference, to talk about things that are really dear not only to our heart, but to your heart and your mission. I really want to thank the panelists who've come all this way to give us a little bit of their experience. We want to thank you for giving them that experience and those difficulties and the situations that they've been put through so that they can be here today and guide us. As you've worked through them, now we can learn from their experience. And we pray that you can continue to be with us all through the conference and work in us to make those connections, learn from each other as we've learned from you. I pray all of these things in your name. Amen. I will now let the speakers go ahead and introduce themselves.
Can we get a hand for our student volunteers? Aren't these ladies wonderful? Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this panel discussion about fundraising. We've got a microphone set up because we're being recorded. We would appreciate that when you have a question that you come to the microphone and ask your question so that I don't have to remember your question and repeat it because I'm old and that doesn't work well. So I want to start by polling the room. Can we see, do we have any free medical clinics in the room? Okay. And so how about charitable medical clinics or hybrids where so non-FQHCs? Okay. And so if you are from 1 to 3 staff people, raise your hand. Okay. If you're from 4 to maybe 7 staff people, raise your hand. Over 10. Okay. So FQHCs, raise your hand. And you're all over 10 employees. Okay. And so, this is going to be an interactive conversation. And so we are hoping that you've got lots of questions about some of the topics that our panelists, who are experts in their field, can address. And so I'd like to start by saying I'm John Mills. I work with CCHF. I'm a senior clinic consultant, meaning I work with folks all over the country that have issues that they're dealing with. Look at this picture. We've determined that we could be brothers here, but we just didn't know it.
You're the smarter one.
And I'm the smarter one, that's true. So Dale, introduce yourself, move that microphone over to you, and tell us a bit about you and your area of expertise.
Hi, my name is Dale. Can you hear me? I live in Waco, Texas, but 25 years of grant writing experience, but that also included all the other areas of fundraising. I'm a clinical social worker by background. You would not know that if I had not told you that once you hear me speak. But I last year came to this conference for the first time, and shortly after that, I got hoodwinked into working with CCHF, doing grant writing and fundraising, and it's been a delight and a joy.
So our grant writing expert is Dale. Justin?
And I guess I'd be the math teacher expert. I spent 4 years as a math teacher, and now I'm in fundraising. I've been doing that for, I guess, 9 years now that I counted up. So I'm currently in Memphis, Tennessee at Church Health, serving as the development director there, and I'm excited to be here.
And Church Health is a large charitable clinic, or you're a hybrid. Do you do billing for like
We do some billing.
some billing?
Yep,
Oh, hybrid clinic. Okay. Mindy.
I'm Mindy Silva. I'm the Executive Director of Philanthropy at SAC Health, also the Executive Director at SAC Health Foundation, which is a grant-making arm of SAC Health. My expertise has been in grant making for over 20 years, and then endeavoring the last 2 years into fundraising and development, which we talked about is the most humbling job I've ever had.
So SAC Health is a large federally qualified health center in Southern California.
That's right.
And in grant making, that means you were sitting on the giving side of the table.
That's right. I had the blessing of serving for many institutions, but one of them over the 11 years of that career, helping facilitate over 100 million in giving for one of the wealthiest tribes in the nation. And it was just such a blessing to be able to serve in that capacity. And, really God drawing me here to SAC Health to see what other needs, what other things I could do in the community. It has been a true blessing to see people be so on fire for Jesus and this work, and humbled to be here today. Thank you.
Super. Elijah.
Hi, everyone. My name's Elijah Melendez, and I've served in free and charitable clinic realm. We're now shifting over to start a community health center in Charleston, South Carolina. So I think the background I bring is in that small shop. So if you are someone who says, I wear a lot of hats, and fundraising happens to be one of those hats, that's what I did for about 4 years. And grateful to be here and be part of the community.
Okay, super. So the floor is open. Who has a question for any one of the panelists? Okay, if you can come to the microphone, please, sir.
My name's Jose Ma. I work with Clínica Médica Primaria in Maryland. We are a charitable clinic. John's been there to visit us. Like many of you, most of our patients that we see are Hispanic, newly transplanted, who work in the agricultural industry, construction, and those sort of things. We also have, we're actually manufacturers of largest or growers of the largest amount of mushrooms in the area in Avenue, Pennsylvania.
Learned something new today.
Yeah, and you could tell because as soon as you cross the state line, you can smell it. But anyway, but that aside, we have thought about approaching companies, farms. We also have a large equestrian presence who hire and even keep these folks on their property. Have any of you had experience approaching these folks? What's the best way? And
So what are you looking for from those organizations?
so most of these folks don't offer insurance. Health
Okay.
Insurance, right? So we try to take that approach to say, hey, these folks don't get insurance from you. We don't say that.
Right.
But we provide something. We can, for $40, you can get a full physical exam, blood work, x-rays, and we take on the responsibility of providing continuing care, keeping them healthy so they can work on your farm,
Right.
mushroom harvest, et cetera. That's our sell.
Sounds a lot like the Memphis plan.
I was just going to lean forward and assert myself. We at Church Health have something called the Memphis Plan, where just what you were saying, for especially small businesses, maybe self-employed folks, that for $50, at least 10 has to be paid by the employer, and then more or less than that can be paid by the employee. It's up to them sort of how that works. And then we serve as sort of their primary care provider. So we have volunteer doctors all over the community that will see them in their specific exam room. So they don't even come to us necessarily. That turns into $1.5 million of revenue that we get every year from that type of thing. So that's out there. We got that passed through the state in 1991 or something when we started that. John was around, I think, during those times. So that's out there. I don't know how easy it would be to do that type of thing, because I think when we started, the concern was that, oh, that sounds like you're an insurer and that's illegal. So that's why we got that change. So anyway, I don't know if any of that's helpful, but it is out there.
So post ACA, what a number of clinics do is they approach small businesses and tell them about the clinic. And many of these business owners would love to be able to afford health insurance, but they just can't. And so you can set up an appeal basically that for X amount, I've seen anywhere from $40 to $80 a month per employee that the business sends to the clinic. The employee can access care as long as the clinic is open, and maybe you can extend some special privilege to some of those patients. And so it is definitely a way that businesses can be a financial supporter of your clinic. You've just got to be very, very clear in your explanation to this business owner that you are not purchasing insurance.
Right. I think that the compliance issue there is a little bit concerning.
Right.
Our approach initially was to address them a little bit more broadly and just say that here are their way of getting into our clinic, and we can provide them the services, what is this worth to you to keep your folks healthy? And it could be a general donation of such and such.
Right. Where you get sort of specific is some of the employees may make more than your eligibility is for patient access. And so that's where you might give them a card that would identify them as a sort of a special person when they come to your clinic, because you might have a process where you've got to be 250% of the poverty level or less. And if you're a single individual, that number is a lot less than if you're a family.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Thank
But I mean, it's definitely a revenue generating tool, but it takes some effort, and I can put you in contact with some clinics that have been successful doing it.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Just wanted to address
Go ahead.
one more thing on sort of carefully how if there is a donation that is written that is not perceived as a quid pro quo, right, from the organization, so that it is genuinely sort of heartfelt part of their social responsibility of the community, and that whatever letter or donation they give reflects that and does not specifically intend that someone will be served as a result of that donation.
So it could trigger other business income for a nonprofit if it's not handled correctly.
Right, or the donor could be perceived as trying to get a service that would benefit them, and then not be charitable.
Right. So can you come to the microphone?
So it strikes me that adds complexity, because does then that get counted as a donation that the business has a possible assumption that they'll be able to deduct from taxes, for example? So I guess I'd love to, it was interesting when you first mentioned it, and how do you handle that piece of it? And secondly, how is the state, wherever you happen to be, involved in the whole process?
Yeah, we're not accountants or attorneys here.
Yeah. I was going to say, boy, I should have done a little bit more research on exactly how we do those things at Church Health. Gosh, we've been doing it for 35 years now, this part of it. So your first question was, how does the state have anything to do?
How do you avoid this being considered a donation on the part of
Yeah.
the business? And how does the state handle it in terms of, I don't know,
fee for
do you need
service?
to register this in some way, or no?
I'm hearing fee for service from the right.
That would be my likelihood, that it's a fee for service type of contractual agreement that is happening. And I don't know if that's through state reimbursement or employee reimbursement or how that exactly is signed up in contract, but it would be like in our case, right? We do, if there's someone who does not have Medi-Cal, we do have funds through a blessing fund that would allow us. So some of that is done through philanthropy, but some of that is done on a sliding scale on a fee for service basis.
I'll jump in as well. Just from the small free clinic, or as you make the transition towards a charitable model or a sliding scale or a hybrid model, all of that gets kind of lumped into earned income or program revenue. And so when it gets reported on a 990, you just have to make a distinction between individual donations and earned income. The earned income would be anything like this. So you're allowed to charge. You just have to separate out those items, and that just comes to finance. I'm not an accountant nor a lawyer, but that's how we did it.
That's how we do it too. Yep.
That is supporting, though, has to also be clear on exactly what this is. Like,
Right.
is it a donation?
Right.
So
Mention that word. Is this a donation or is this?
And that's between the business and the IRS.
well, I would say too, just our responsibility when you start putting on the development hat. I like to say it's resource development. And so as much as we're fundraising, often you get tasked with doing like this business to business sales kind of thing. And you just have to be clear that this is not a charitable donation. You're making a business transaction, right? And that's okay. And that can be your role if you're an external facing community member, but that you just have to be clear as the solicitor that that's what we're doing here, right? And if the business decides to do some kind of tax deduction or something, you're not held liable, right? You've made that abundantly clear. In the MOU that you have established, for example, needs to have writing that says like, this is not a charitable donation, this is a fee for service model.
I have actually a great example of that. I worked for the tribe, and they gave over $40 million to a specific medical institution, and that was purely charitable. There was nothing in return other than the generosity of that gift. Or multiple gifts over years. They also set up a separate fee-for-service model with that institution for their tribal citizens in sort of like drug and alcohol addiction, but that was a paid-for service, very separate from their philanthropy. So there are ways to do both with corporations, institutions, organizations. You just have to be very clear which is which, and if there are going to be services, there should be some contractual agreement in place.
And this sort of is around the sponsorship area. Justin, in your session, you mentioned that you don't put on a special event unless it is underwritten by sponsors.
Correct.
And so how do you begin to find those organizations as potential sponsors, and what's your pitch to them for supporting this event?
Sure. It depends on the event and it depends on the organization and what they're looking at. So I'll preface with that. But generally, we are trying to partner with organizations who are wanting to be a part of us and wanting to help contribute to the welfare of the community. There will be, of course, for them some marketing opportunities, and if they're a presenting sponsor, they'll be able to stand on stage and do that type of thing, and we will get some number of seats and those types of things. So we're pretty clear for those bigger events exactly what your sponsorships go towards and what you get for that sponsorship. In terms of approaching those, it's obviously a lot of the same folks every year that we keep a good relationship with and want to make sure that they continue coming back and are happy. And we've had a couple of examples of some, like a credit union that wasn't really happy with some of the sponsorship opportunities we were presenting, and had a lunch, talked about it, figured out what made the most sense, and then they came in at $15,000 for like a little race that we did. So those types of things. Honestly, I think I treat those sponsorship opportunities similar to how I would a major donor, being upfront about what they're interested in, what they want to get out of it, and then we try to find the match sort of with us that matches what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Questions from the audience? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Peggy Kennedy from Neighborhood Christian Clinic. And I was wondering how do you tell when an organization is too dependent on a few major donors? Is there a percentage of revenue that you would assign that should be a healthy range for major gifts versus the base, mass market gifts type thing?
Who wants to tackle the percentage of revenue from multiple streams?
And I guess the follow-up question would be, what's the best way to reduce that risk?
What was the last thing?
What's the best way to reduce that risk of having just a few major donors with the bulk of the revenue?
I think we're all looking at each other because I don't know if there's a established principle, but I know that we all probably have some general rules of thumb that we would mark. So I might say, like, if anything's above 50% in your different sources of revenue, I would start to take a look at that. Now, it really depends on your model as well, right? So like, if your organization is heavily grant funded, then I might segment that out a little bit more and say, is that all in one bucket of one source of grant funding? And what if that went away tomorrow? Same thing goes with individual giving. If I say, just because you're 70% individual giving funded, is that all in one donor that's giving 70%? Or is that in 25 different donors, major donors that add up to 50%, and the other 20% is in, recurring gifts, for example. So I would think about it less on, less of a hard rule of thumb on percentage and more on a particular source or stream. And so like if there's one donor, if they went away tomorrow, your organization may not exist. That's a significant risk.
Right.
Great point. I would add that the only funding stream that I would keep the closest eye on that can get out of whack, the easiest. I'll go backwards here. Major donors. It's not safe to say you can never have too many, but I've been doing this 25 years, and so I've collected horror stories along the way. When you think, oh, major donors, that can, if it's not one, we've got 500 donors. I worked at an organization for 10 years. Actually, I started because what had happened was all of their income, there was really no diversification. All their income came from individual donors and churches. And they didn't do grants and they didn't do other revenue streams. And very unpredictable. But the co-directors of the organization were married. And it was a very conservative religious organization. And unfortunately, the directors who were married to each other got divorced. And because of the nature, because of the homogeneity of the donor base, and I'm not making this up, I wish I were, 85% of their donors across major donors and congregations decided within a 2-month span, we do not wish to support an organization where divorce happens. And so they were left high and dry with very little notice in an area that they felt very safeguarded around. And I was called in kind of as a Hail Mary, with no offense to Mary there, to start looking at diversifying the funding stream and quickly, which is not a good recipe for grants. Grants are not a panacea. They're not a quick thing to happen. But thank goodness there was a way that they had previously not recognized to generate program income from the results of their training program and products to sell, and then add grants into that, and then slowly build up the major donor base to be much more diversified in that sense. And what I was going to answer at the beginning is I keep the one that can go sideways the quickest is grants.
Right. Yeah.
And I would say if the percentage of income gets over a quarter of the total income, you need to at least look at, is that sustainable? Can we keep doing that? The last place I worked was an FQHC. I was there for 7 years. The annual budget was $80 million at the time, and my last year there, our department that was in charge of fundraising raised $21 million. And there were internal whispers about that may be too much, that may be too much.
Thank you.
Yeah, does that help? Yeah.
My question was kind of related to that. And I think if you ask your CFO when you're audited and fill out your 990, there is a threshold established, and I believe it's 5 or 10%. So if you have a donor who's contributing 5 or 10%, they don't say it's a problem, but they want you to list those names, and then they'll ask questions about the relationship with that particular donor. So I think there might be some information out there. Because I'm concerned about that same issue, my question for you has to do with getting planned gifts and building endowment. And we're experiencing, when you're a free charitable, you raise all the money, donors age out. And so I'm in a season right now where I'm trying to do that. So I'm wondering, they're already your best friends because they're giving you money every year. Do you have any advice on how to move them into the planned giving conversations and what that can look like? Anything you have to offer about that, I'd be very open.
I'll just add to that. I'd love to hear that too. We've not entered that space, but I do know some institutions around us who have been sort of asking, and it has started to, some donors are very open to it and others it has rubbed the wrong way. So if anyone's done successfully, yeah, I'd love to hear that too.
I can speak at least to some success that we've had at my organization. I think I've got a very strong plan giving advisory council who I can go to when I have questions about which vehicle makes the most sense for what my donor's telling me about this. I tend to, for those prospects, not hands off, but when I broach a plan giving talk with them, will refer them to their own financial advisor and say, talk to your person about how serious this is and then where we can fit in. We've got all the pieces in place for, any type of stock gift or how those wills work and once it's through probate and all those things. We have a great relationship with the community foundation who will help liquidate non-cash assets and then give to us. But in terms of approaching those asks, which I think is what you were talking about, I've had most of my donors are pretty open to those conversations and are thinking about it, and they're getting approached by a lot of organizations. So that you have strong connections and relationships with them already, I think helps make those conversations easier. Their budgets don't have to change when they start making a planned gift, and I think that has opened some of my folks' eyes to, if I'm making this planned gift, I'm going to continue, our relationship's not going away. I want you to come to all of our events. You're on a stricter budget now, but, once that will matures, that will help us a great deal. You'll still be able to feel like you're doing a great job now with this organization or this community that you care about. And that's worked so far for us, but it's pretty, for me, it's being upfront and honest. Like, I have some business to talk with you about. What do you think about this idea? And then that starts the conversation that will be months and months and figuring those things out. It's a patient game, at least in my experience.
I offered some other practical tips. Justin's comes from the plan giving world, so definitely talk to him. One, I would say identifying who a good lead for legacy gifts or a planned gift would be. So planned gifts would be like anything that is more complex than just giving a straight cash donation. So if they have to make a plan for it, that's my general rule of thumb for a planned gift. That can be gifts of stock. It can be a bequest or charitable bequest and a will. There's lots of others, gift annuities and trusts and all the rest. A legacy gift is one that's intended to outlive the donor. And so as we're thinking about legacy giving, I would say a good lead is someone who, this was a good thing taught to me, someone who has elevated your organization to the status of family is someone who would be a good legacy gift candidate. So if they've left you in their will, they have made you family, and you should respect and steward that relationship well. The second thing I'd say is creating community around it. This is why giving societies are what all the universities do. Because if you can create this shared idea around community, they see the benefit of their legacy gift now, which is really rewarding. And then third, whenever I do a planned gift, I encourage a blended gift. So to say, not only do we want, this is especially helpful if they're your current major donors, we would say, we would love for you to consider this legacy gift in addition to this level of giving now. And have them make a pledge in the near term, maybe over 3 years or something. And what you've done is they can see the reward while they're alive and they can participate in it, right? And then think about, man, this is going to reap so many rewards later on as well as like the down payment of something that's greater. The final thing I would say is for people that don't like their name on things, which is very real and we should absolutely honor that, I would encourage them to say, who would you like to honor through this gift? It doesn't have to be themselves. It can be the founder of the organization that they were best friends with. It can be a parent that had a meaningful connection to the organization. It could be for future generations, so in honor of my children or something like that. And that really elevates what legacy gifts could mean.
So
I got something else, sorry. That sparked, I'm fried just doing the hour before this, and now we're back here. So that made me think. I have a good group of planned givers who are advertising for me. They'll call folks. They'll have the conversation. They'll open the door to prospects that I don't even know about or aren't current donors that they will know, like, oh, they're going to love this and they're going to be a good candidate for that. That's the practical tip for me.
that's great if you can get it.
Good work if you can get it. Yeah, absolutely.
So an area that I've just sort of become aware of is the required minimum distribution at age 73. If you've contributed to a 401k or a traditional IRA, you know, Mr. Government says, well, you've got to start taking money out of this retirement account, whether you need it or not. And so there's a subset of our potential donors or our current donors who don't need that money, but might not have considered the fact that they can take that distribution and give it directly to the clinic. And so instead of it becoming a taxable event for the individual, they get a tax write-off. And so one strategy that I've learned about is just emailing, segmenting your donor base, realizing those that are, 72 and a half or above, and just send them an email. Did you realize that you could do this?
So
wow.
one side note, at least in the state where I am, the sexy thing about those RMDs, if the person has started that and then they pass, the person who inherits that fund, that retirement fund, that requirement for the RMD, for the required minimum distribution, outlives them. And so if their 50-year-old child is now the recipient of that, if they've inherited that RMD continues. And so that is one of the, I don't mean to sound like a bad person, but when you have people who get in that RMD, it's actually a generational type of gift, and it passes to a younger person, and then you can work with them and educate them that that's going to be happening every year. And many times I've found in my experience to honor their parents, the child will continue giving that RMD because they never saw it, previously, and it's a way to continue that gift. Yeah.
Shameless plug for CCHF. We've just launched a board fundraising breakthrough course, and this conversation about RMDs is included as just one of those ways to engage your donor base around, supporting the organization. And so you can click on the QR code and learn all about that course. Who's got another question for the panel? Yes, ma'am.
So I'm with a small free and charitable clinic in North Carolina, and
It's tight.
I think it's okay. I think it's all right. And we have for the last number of years, we did initially and then stopped during the COVID years and then just restarted a yearly fundraiser. I'm not completely convinced that it is worth the effort and the money, but I would love your advice. Yeah.
So how much do you raise, and what is it?
What do you mean?
Is it a gala, a dinner?
It
Is it
has
a
been, it has been.
run?
No, it has been a brunch with a main speaker and usually some either a video or a direct interview with at least one or two people who
Sure.
have received services from the clinic.
And how much have you raised in the past with that?
I think it's been really variable because it's been so dependent a little bit on the cost of putting it on, right? So maybe, I don't know, $20,000, $30,000.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
That's good context for us.
Yeah, I'd love to answer that. So when I came onto SAC Health, it'll be 2 years ago in May, the first thing people were like, are you going to do a golf tournament? Are you going to do a gala? Are you going to do a fundraiser? And I was like, absolutely not. It requires a significant lift from a team to do that. And unless you have like a highly engaged volunteer team with a lot of in-kind support, it can put a lot of stress on a very small team. So the strategy going in at SAC Health was to really focus on the relationship building and to really steward that well. In about a year and a half, going from zero in philanthropy, we were able to raise 10.6 million in that first year and a half and have about 15 million-ish in the pipeline. And none of that through fundraising efforts. We did finally bring on a grants and philanthropy partner after 2 years, who will be supporting with additional grant writing. We have successfully, prior to me coming on board, we have a very great grant writer who's been able to bring in about 12 to 15 million a year in grant writing. But that was all in government type funding. So looking at private philanthropy and other foundations. But the grants and philanthropy partner now will focus on more of the sort of what we call like entry level gifts. But again, those are relationship building type of, if you quote unquote fundraisers, they're not actually events, but they're opportunities to engage and to share what you're doing sort of to like mass audiences, if you will, and then have the opportunity for them to come talk to you. I do think there might be something in the future when we have a large enough donor base that we do want to gather them all. In our first year, we did a small, very intimate lunch with like 12 of our major sort of either prospects or donors or partners, and made it an intimate lunch. But that's just my opinion. If it's a very small team, it's a very big lift.
Agreed.
I'm closer to the end than the start of life. And so do you have any advice for how we can help this next generation buy into our organizations charitably? I mean, there's a lot of, even the talk we've had today has been a lot about older people and, planned giving related to estates and things like that. But I think this younger generation has a big heart for the work that we do. Any successes you've had of tying in folks in their 20s, 30s, and 40s?
Great question.
Yeah, I think you're speaking my love language. That is a generation that I have a great affinity for, and we're given opportunity to come speak to like audiences of that coming up in June. But the first thing said is, they don't have any money, right? I said, I know. I remember when I was like in my 20s, early in my career, and with all this student loan debt, I didn't. I said, but a $5 gift is still significant. A $20 gift is still significant. It still feeds a family. It still allows us to give a grocery bag. It still allows us to serve a patient. And so I think it's starting small. There's a saying, right? Like a $10 million donor didn't start at 10 million. They generally started with something small, right? And grew into something bigger. And as they grow, you hope that their affinity and the love that they have for your mission continues to grow too. I sit as a co-chair of what's called Inland Empire Funders Alliance. So it's a consortium of funders from throughout our region. And one of the things we're talking about is the shift in how we approach philanthropy for that next generation. Should we be talking to the School of Entrepreneurship? We know there's such a huge movement of how and where people are positioning themselves in careers. And should we be having that conversation in more broader spaces than just sort of the traditional philanthropy model?
Yeah, I agree with all that, and would like to add that something we have started is trying to approach donors who aren't the like 20, 30-year-old, but like a 40, 50-year-old whose kids are getting ready to leave high school. And in our eyes, that's like, okay, all of a sudden we got some time and some maybe money in our hands. So that's the group that we have recently been targeting. What we did is started a volunteer committee for high school students that's very achievable. 3 volunteer events they're in. So then what we're going to do is have at the end of the year a nice little reception where we give them a pin and a certificate for having done this, but their parents are invited. They're going to be there, and we say, Church Health is doing this work, and it's because of volunteers like you that have made this happen. And then all of a sudden we have phone numbers and email addresses for these folks who are about to get a raise when their kids are out of high school or college, depending on the situation. So that's been something that we've been trying to attack, which speaks to the earlier question of the aging donors and, trying to make sure we're not too dependent on those things. That's the next generation, at least that we're sort of focused on.
And, younger people give differently. Yes. The mechanism for donating is different. And what do we need to realize about that as we're trying to engage them?
Yeah, they give electronically. Yep. They might give more sporadically, right? Than sort of on an ongoing basis is kind of the trend. But one thing I didn't say about fundraising, that is, if there is a donor that you have already that does actually have a passion for what you do, the best fundraising strategy could be asking them to host the fundraiser. Mm-hmm. Right, rather than your team, and you come on as sort of a supporting entity of that, but that does help expand your bandwidth if you want to still do some level of fundraising in the community.
What about asking a major donor that's been with you for a while to introduce you to their children?
If I may, seeing as I am in that generation, I will say on that note specifically, John, this is especially important with legacy gifts, just to throw it back, but to say, as my donors are aging out, how can I meet the rest of their family and encourage affinity within the family? And this isn't just, Mimi's thing, this is our thing, right? This is our organization as well, and a cause that we care about. So that's important for one, especially important for family foundations and those with them. Because those younger members are going to reach voting age on the family foundation at some point. The other thing I want to say is that what are we asking for, and what are the success metrics? And so younger people may not have a lot of disposable income, neither may people that are retired, right? But what those two segments have in common is they want a mentor and they need a mentee, right? And so if we can pair them up together, the success metric may be we're building out a community and we're engaging our donors and investing them within our ecosystem, right? Like we host a brunch that isn't a solicitation event. It's a mentorship speed dating round. And it's hosted by us, and that requires little to no lift. But just an idea like that creates community and says, oh, wow, the healthcare nonprofit that I care about hosted that and provided this amazing lift in my professional career as a young person. By pairing me up with this mentor, it's made me a friend for life, and we have this shared affinity. Ideas like that require less investment financially, but can leverage the relational capital that you've built in your donor systems, really engages donors and can make it make sense to launch a more specialty program like that, a young adults or young professionals program or circle.
We're actually crossing that bridge right now. So we have a major donor who asked if he could bring his daughter through. And she became a monthly and then an in-kind donor. And then now have been asked if they could bring their grandchildren through. And so this is a family who will inherit, hopefully, indefinite generational wealth. But I think it really just started with stewarding the first relationship right. A lot of love and care has gone into over 20 years of cultivating that relationship prior to even me coming here to SAC Health. But it's interesting, when we didn't have a CRM or database or anything, and they asked me, how do you want to build it? And I said, imagine you're in a relationship with someone, and when you're just like that first, like, you want to know everything about them. What's their favorite color, and when is their birthday, and what are their hobbies, and what excites them, and what are all the things they're passionate about? And I want the database to collect and capture the heart as best as it can in this space, because I want to be in celebration. If the person is in mourning, I want to know what is happening in their life. They are my friend first and foremost before any dollar ever comes through that door. And that genuine connection changes everything. And they know it and they feel it when it is genuine and not a transaction. That is at the forefront of philanthropy. And then if you share, of course, that faith-based perspective, I think it does something to cement God's will in both your life. And it gives you deeper meaning, deeper purpose. And they want their kids and their grandchildren to experience that.
Mindy, put on that funder hat as somebody representing a foundation. What are the must-dos for a new application to a foundation? You've never funded this organization before. What are you looking for?
Yeah, I think, thinking about how you have all of your ducks in a row, your policies, your procedures, your legal, your agreements, and that sounds so technical, but the truth is, you want someone to feel like they can trust every part of how that donation is stewarded, and that both you and the institution are both equally protected. So we had at the beginning of mine, one of the major donors was like, hey, I'm excited about what you're doing. I see the good. I see that it is responsible stewardship. I'm ready to give. And I said, please hold your gift. We're not ready. We're still going through policy, procedure, and legal, and building out CRMs. And until I can tell you with the utmost confidence that I feel that would be stewarded in the best way, and that you and both the institution would be protected on both sides, because this would, include naming, different naming rights and whatnot. And they said, I appreciate that level of transparency and care, that it's not just about the dollar. So I think first and foremost, having the ducks in a row. I tell people, tell me about your board and I'll tell you everything about your organization. Is your board in unison? Are they generous? Do they care about the community, or is there a lot of rift in between? Most of the time I had opportunity to review hospital and clinics across the Inland Empire. Hundreds. And I would often get the CEO, COO, CFO, or clinical team in the room, and it's very easy and a board member, and to see how much synergy there is or there isn't, is very much telling about where your dollars, sort of how I would recommend them. And then, of course, you look at the financials. Are those in order? Are your 990s up to date? Some of the simple technical things. But I also really looked at the heart, the servant heart of the organization. And, I think that is one of the most important aspects. Some of those technical things can be worked on, right? And you can build capacity, and you can give grants to build capacity with an organization to upskill some of their infrastructure. If you see that there are some of those sort of weakened, pieces of it. But what money can't buy is someone's heart. and their heart to serve, and in the way in which they do it in synergy with one another is what will make that successful or not. And when you're asking for whether it's $1 or $1 million, it's the same questions I ask over and over.
Dale, what makes a grant a good grant or a bad grant? Not all grants are good, right?
That's right. It's a great question. I just finished doing a 7-hour course on grant writing, so I'm going to try to distill this down in less. 5 minutes, good.
So you got 5 minutes.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer another question as well.
Okay.
Is there anyone who's curious just about being a first-time grant writer or seeking? Did anyone want? Yeah, be happy to talk with you afterward. Just a couple of high points. The first should be encouraging. Anybody can do it. It's not that hard. I'm always cautious about being part of a group that would accept me as a member, and so the grant writing world, there are multiple paths. There's no scripted way to get into it. It does require dedication and an interest in what you're doing for, but anyone can write grants. The higher level of skill is managing multiple grants well. At my last job, I was 25 to 30 concurrently at a time of management. That's a different level of skill, but actually writing a grant, you need to not be anxious at all about that. It is about following directions. It's about relationships. It's about asking good questions. If you've seen one grant, anyone want to finish that sentence?
You've seen one.
You've seen one grant,
Yeah.
right? Everyone is a new opportunity to learn. What I would say is you do have to get your house in order. You have to make sure that you've got the infrastructure and the time. So what makes a bad grant is when you don't have a good idea going in or collect the information you need to see to have a good return on investment, to be crass about it. Is what you're going to get as a result of that grant going to be worth the time? When you talk about, I'm going to pick on golf because it's a silly sport. If it takes 10 employees an average of 25 hours each, and you look at the time that that's taken away from other, especially revenue generating things, you need to look at what kind of work. You need to have a good idea of what that grant is going to give you. Some of the worst grants I've received, the happiest day was not when I received the grant, it's when it was over. It's because the reporting or the intrusiveness of the reporting just impeded other tasks within the organization. So not all grants are good grants. And so you're looking ideally for something that minimizes the amount of work, that it's streamlined, maximizes the return you get from it, and that it's consistent with your mission. A bad grant will pull you off mission. If it's just big money, I just think that's a horrible trap to fall into, is chasing that money and losing sight of what the mission is. I think also a bad grant strategy is to either just write as many grant applications as you can and hope some of them stick. And in the same vein, you need to have a good idea and an analysis, and this develops over time. What is the probability of us getting that grant? Is this a $5 million grant that they're only giving out 3 awards in the country? And are we truly that good that we may get that? Or is this the grant that we really excel in a certain area and we've got a good chance? And you can often, when you have good grant officers, you can get a good idea of what they're looking for, and are you in a good position to be considered a strong candidate? And then I think the last question, it's a little off base, but I was ready to say this anyway. I think a really important question that I learned much later than I should have is asking the question, what happens if you get this grant? What will it do and forward our organization? What will the result be? Not to the funder, but to our organization. And then the sister question to that is, what will happen if we don't get this grant? So you want to be careful about applying for grants that if you don't get it, your whole program is shot. You need to be able to talk to the grant maker about what's going to happen because of this, and giving them a compelling, not whiny story about if we don't get this grant. We are applying to other places, and they'll often ask that, but you want to give them a good story about how important to this organization, not in a we're going to go broke type of story, but in what it will propel you to and the aspirational success of receiving that grant.
Super. So I think we are about out of time. Give a hand to the panel for their expertise. Well, that didn't work at all. Oh, well. Glad you've got the QR code. No, that's for you can all go there, but.
So on the Whova app, there's also a link, but we also have the QR codes right here if that's easier for you. As kind of Rick Donlan said, like these evaluation forms at the end of each session are just so important for like us getting feedback and, for the moderators and the people who came to get feedback as well, and so that each and every conference can be even better. And so we were told to tell you, if you love CCHF, if you loved what they said, generally, please fill it out. It only takes a couple minutes, but it really makes a big difference.
And it's also in the chat function in your Whova app under this section.
Yes, if you go to the Whova
There's a
app
link.
under the agenda, under Thursday, and you find session 3, and then you click the name of this session about fundraising. Under the chat function, there is a link, but I will be bringing it. Anybody need it?
All right. Thank you all for being participatory. And I think most everybody here is going to be around for the weekend, so find us if you have other questions.